I think I see everybody. I see Tom, Tanya, Rich, Vicky. All right, okay. All right. See everybody. Okay, so I think we're ready to call the order. So this is the meeting of December 7th of the Woodland City Council. And tonight we're going to start with a closed session meeting for this evening. So we'll be back at 6 p.m. for open session. Okay. Good evening. This is Mayor Myra Vega. I'd like to make clear for the record that this meeting and it should be reflected in the minutes that this is the regular city council meeting of December 7th, 2021 of this Woodland City Council. Will be conducted pursuant to Government Code Section 54953E, which allows the city to hold meeting via teleconference during a proclaimed state of emergency, when state or local officials are imposed or recommended measure to promote social distancing. Okay. Right. With that said, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Fernandez.
Here.
Councilmember Garcia Cadena.
Here.
Councilmember Landsberg.
Present.
Councilmember Stallard.
Present.
Mayor Vega.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Okay, so now we're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'm going to invite Evis to lead us in the pledge, if you will.
Sure. Ready? I'll begin. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America.
and to the republic
We
for which it
stand
stands,
one
one
nation
nation,
under God,
under God, indivisible,
with
liberty, and
liberty and justice.
all.
Thank you, Evis. I appreciate it. Okay, and now we're going to go on and do the swearing in of myself as mayor. So,
Please raise your right hand. Say "I," state your name, and repeat after me.
Myra Vega,
Do solemnly swear
support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties upon which I am about to enter.
the duties upon which I'm about to enter. Okay, thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
okay. And now
As,
we're gonna have-
Yeah, sorry, as the city clerk returns to her office, we'll have Mayor Pro Tem Fernandez also sworn in by oath virtually.
Can I go ahead, Ken, or Mayor Vega?
so I think,
Oh, wait,
Anna,
Anna.
do you have the script? Or we'll wait for was Anna going to provide the script, or do you have
No,
it?
we have it.
Oh,
Okay.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
Perfect.
so
Okay.
let's go ahead and get started. Who will be swearing you in today? Mayor Pro Tem Fernandez.
I'll have, thank you, Mayor Vega. I'll have my husband swearing me in this evening. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Armando Fernandez, thank you.
Okay, my dear wife, please repeat after me. Raise your right hand. Good. I
I, Victoria Fernandez,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and to the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties upon which I am about to enter.
the duties upon which I am about to enter.
Congratulations.
Okay, wonderful. Congratulations, Mayor
Thank
Pro
you.
Tem Hernandez.
Thank you, Mayor Vega, and congratulations to you too.
Thank you. Okay, so I think at this point, we're gonna invite for public comment. So, Madam Clerk, is there any member of the public who has submitted an email or left a voicemail for the general public comment items not on the agenda? Oh,
There is a voicemail message that will be played back.
thank you.
Hi, yes, this is Ron Ortel calling in for public comment. On the 9th, we're going to have a meeting, as you know, regarding the sports park, Rick Gonzalez Park and all that. And as you probably know, I asked the CFD management company for an answer regarding whether or not the neighborhood can vote out at CFD. They're going to call me back, but instead they called somebody in the city who I suppose was supposed to contact me. So, you know, I would think the neighborhood's going to want an answer on the 9th if we can vote it out. You know, and, you know, so that's one issue. The other issue, of course, is Rick Gonzalez Park. I'm sorry you guys are once again setting up to create a conflict that doesn't need to be there. You know, I went through this war with Tom Stallard on the council at that time when they wanted to put housing in the park, right where the Rick Gonzalez Park sign is today. So just unnecessary. The kids are already using the park accompanied by, you know, teachers from the school, which would be the case anyway, because they direct them for team sports. There's your compromise right there. Just let them use the park like anybody else. There are no requirements for that. Ken I keeps referring to requirements. What requirements? That they have to take over a park site? They already have the largest amount of land of any elementary school in Woodland. You know, the way this is being handled is just it's dishonest, and it's insulting to the neighborhood to do this, to take away a thing like that. You guys should be out there with a sign telling people what you want to do, because most of these people running on that path don't know still that you're planning to shorten the path and, you know, take away their jogging path, their exercise path. I can't be out there all the time telling them. So they're going to be shocked if you do this. And, you know, we may have options if Tom Stallard would stop pursuing a pole on the 20-acre site that they already own right across the street from a massive amount of development that you guys are going to approve. That's one option. The other one is start working with the tech park developer more. You guys are responsible for that along with the school district, making a deal on that. Let them build the housing first if needed, but get that done. So anyway, I at this point, you guys, I don't know. I can't believe that you would do this to the neighborhood again. Second attempt to take away part of the park. You guys are just unqualified, in my opinion, to represent the city.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Is that the only?
No,
voice message?
I do have, I did want to mention that the city has once again received the same email from CCIB regarding the speed limits on public roads. We have received it each meeting for the last several months. We will note its receipt in the minutes. And then I do have one email, and it's regarding the roadway deterioration at Elm Street and Clanton Way Alley. Hello, this letter is a response to the ongoing road deterioration issue at Clanton Way Alley and Elm Street. Mr. Craig Locke, Public Works Director, was assigned to respond to this issue. He has been informative and briefly outlined what he is authorized to do. His response and plan are to grind notches into the roadway to vacate the pooling that occurs yearly. It is my opinion that this will not be enough to remedy the situation. What is not being addressed is the neighbors' tree roots are growing and raising the road in addition to the soil that is sinking due to the deteriorating city oaks tree roots. So again, we have compounding issues. This tree will continue to grow and the roots will once again raise the road. This, combined with the sinkhole, is going to cause more pooling and further damage to our property. So my next question is, why aren't the neighbors' tree and roots being addressed as a potential contributing cause to this issue? I will invite any of you to visit our property to see for yourself the situation. And while you have decided on a plan, I also have a few requests. I would like the city to remove all asphalt from our original property line adjacent to the road and outside of the current fence. This may involve another survey. The most recent city survey just a few months ago only indicated one marked point midway on the property line. So the remaining locations of the east and west points are not denoted and visible. I would also like the city to waive the $134 permit fee, the $58 permit issuance fee, and the $1 fee for the California Green Code implementation for a new fence. After this is completed, we will move our fence back to its original location, recovering the space that was available for use. Please understand that we are not interested in an easement or right-of-way passage. We have for years communicated openly with city representatives and now believe that our fence line has been improperly managed, and we are seeking to prevent further issues from occurring in the future. If you have any questions, I can be reached at 530-400-5234 or by email at circa15@hotmail.com. Thank you, Eulalio Ortega. And that's all I have.
Okay, are there any hands raised for anybody joining us via Zoom?
No hands are raised.
Okay, and we had folks that walked into the chambers. Were they wanting to comment on an item on the agenda?
I don't know, Mayor Vega. I know that Kimberly McKinney was assisting them. I believe it might be for the water sewer rates.
Okay. Okay, so now we'll go to item G, which is communications, council communications. So at this time, I'm gonna invite council to start, provide their updates. So Councilwoman Garcia Cadena, would you get us started?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Vega. Let's see. First, I want to start by thanking Woodland PD for organizing this great Santa neighborhood event that they have going on right now. I know tonight is night 2, and I've just heard so much positive feedback. People are really excited about it. So good job. Kudos to Woodland PD and the fire department, and that's bringing some happiness to our community right now. I also want to report back that I received really positive feedback on the Shop Small Saturday. So I think the city did a great job in promoting that, and people seem to turn out and really be starting their Christmas shopping. So that's great. And then one last thing, this holiday season, I wanted to remind people that Yolo County has approximately 500 children currently in foster care. And of those, 88 are currently on a waiting list for a court-appointed special advocate. So if anyone is interested in being a CASA and being a stable role model for a child in foster care, please reach out to CASA. They're a great program, and they're really in need of some more volunteers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Garcia Cadena. Councilmember Landsberg.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple of things tonight, Madam Mayor. On November 30th, I had the pleasure of observing and viewing the Woodland Police Department's annual awards telecast. Unfortunately, the ceremony this year had to be not in person again, so maybe next year. Congratulations to all of those employees who were recognized, but also want to take the time to recognize Chief Cap and his command staff. we're taking the time to call out those employees who exemplify the quality of the police department staff. It's needless to say, the outstanding individuals who make up that organization. On December 2nd, I did attend the Homeless Executive Commission for Yolo County. We heard a great report from our colleagues and friends in West Sacramento who are seeing some significant improvement in their efforts to reduce homelessness in their community with several outstanding projects. It was good to see the progress that they're making in West Sacramento. Last Saturday, Madam Mayor, in response to the concerns of the neighbors that live around Ralph Harris Park, our crime prevention specialist, Officer Morgan Snedeker and Officer Ryan Roybal, served as hosts for a neighborhood gathering at Ralph Harris Park. This is in response to their concerns that there have been issues in the park. And even though the weather wasn't the best, we did have several neighbors show up and come out to the park in support of this, hopefully, first of many gatherings. Also, staff from Parks and Rec brought the Rec to Go van out to the park for the kids to play with. Lastly, Madam Mayor, we should not forget that today is National Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day. We still need to remember and honor all those people, all those men and women who lost their lives when Pearl Harbor was attacked on December 7, 1941. There were more than 3,500 people who lost their lives or were wounded on that very tragic day. And that's all I have, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Landsberg. All right, and Councilmember Stallard.
Thank you, Mayor Vega. I just want to express my best wishes for the holiday season for everybody and express my gratitude for all of those who are doing so much to make the community more festive as we move through this happy month. Last weekend, we got to hear the Woodland Community Chamber Singers in a holiday concert that was just superb. And they put a lot of effort into it. Obviously, we got to see Elf at the Opera House, another significant theatrical effort that's bringing joy to many in the community. And I join my colleagues in appreciating our police and fire. I was out there with my grandson last night watching the Santa go by and bring cheer to everybody. And also all of those in the community that contribute to the spirit of the season through decorations of at their home and places of work and the like. It really adds. And I also got to go to the Winter's Tractor Parade last Saturday night, first time. What a scene that is. It's there to be commended for coming upon a really great idea and maximizing it. And then the last thing I'll say is this Friday is going to be kind of the hallmark of all of it for downtown, with a wonderful parade with 40 units in it from West Street right down to the 3rd, maybe beyond. And there'll be 40 units in the parade, kids marching, tractors decorated, all kinds of wonderful things. And then we'll be doing our tree light. That starts at 5 o'clock. We'll probably run it for at least an hour, maybe hour and a half. And then I believe 7 o'clock, we're actually lighting our big, beautiful Christmas tree in Heritage Plaza. So a lot of wonderful things for the season. And it's worth getting out and participating and enjoying it all. And I'm glad Small Business Saturday was a big success. Those merchants really have knocked themselves out for everybody. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Stallard. Okay, and Mayor Pro Tem Fernandez.
Thank you, Mayor Vega. I just want to thank Woodland Christian School for being one of those organizations that's doing their job at trying to bring our community together during COVID. They started last year and again this year, along with Dignity Health and so many volunteers who have worked together and collaborated to bring the Festival of Lights and Parade. It's really a nice activity for the family, a safe way to travel through and still feel that Christmas spirit. So congratulations to them for bringing our community together. And last weekend for First Friday, for all the activities that were organized out there, lots of music at all the different businesses, and just want to congratulate two of our local businesses that had their grand opening within the last month, and one on last Friday, which was Clicking Sisters, who have a storefront now on Main Street now. It's a photography studio. And then the Gallery Coffee Roasters, who opened up on Friday. So congratulations to those persistent business owners that are doing a great job of keeping their storefronts busy during this COVID and holiday season. So thank you to them and congratulations. And again, I just want to thank Woodland PD and the Woodland Fire Department, as my colleagues have said, for having connections with Santa and having him come visit Woodland. So just it's an exciting moment for our little ones to get to see Santa driving through Woodland. And then I want to thank our former mayor with the 100th mayoral proclamation on November 27th for Rose Smith, who turned 100 at the Californian. So I was able to attend and present that to her. So belated happy birthday again to Rose Smith, who turned 100 years old. So I just want to hope to see 100 years. So I thank you, Mayor Vega, and congratulations to you. And thank you, former Mayor Stallard, for your service.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Fernandez. And for myself, I just want to say, former Mayor Stallard, I don't know what the right term is, but I just want to thank you for your service, for everything you did last year to get us through what was a challenging year. I think it was hard to think that, 2020 was going to be a prolonged pandemic, but here we are. I just really appreciate all your work you did to lead our council and our city through those challenging times. For myself, I want to join my colleagues in thanking Woodland PD for putting on a great event. They did a great job at coordinating the annual award ceremony. I just really want to thank the women and men who serve in our department. Many of the stories that Chief Cap shared, recognizing those moments of these are really true heroes, right? And sharing those, and a lot of those stories resonated with me, and I thought about all of the time that those women and men spend away from their families to serve our community and keep our community safe. So I appreciate them. Again, I think that the buzz around town is all around Santa, riding all around the neighborhood. I think this is just such a joy. I'm very thankful that we're able to do that. These are opportunities to bring neighborhoods together and really celebrate this season. Then lastly, I wanted to just acknowledge, like Councilmember Landsberg mentioned, today is National Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day. I'm going to read an excerpt from President Biden's proclamation. On December 7th, 1941, the Imperial Japanese Navy attacked our forces at Pearl Harbor and other locations in Hawaii, taking the lives of over 2,000 service members and civilians, and leading the United States to declare its entrance into World War II. It's a day that still lives in infamy 80 years later. As we mark National Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day, we honor the patriots who perished, commemorate the valor of those who defended our nation, and recommit ourselves to carrying forth the ensuing peace and reconciliation that brought a better future for our world. Okay. With that, I'm going to turn it over to City Manager Hyatt. Any communications or items of note on the City Council long-range calendar?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Vega. I'll start with just acknowledging former Mayor Stallard's contribution last year. It was a pleasure, certainly working with Tom and leading the council through last year, and absolutely look forward to working with Mayor Vega and Mayor Pro Tem Fernandez this year. Wanted to just sort of build on the Santa Parade that public safety has been instrumental in bringing back this year by popular demand, and also encourage folks that are going to be waiting for Santa to pass through their street in their neighborhood, take advantage of the Santa Tracker app that our IT folks helped put together this year as well. It's a great resource. You can track Santa and make sure you don't miss him as he comes through the neighborhood. Also want to acknowledge the great work of the police department and Chief Caff and his administrative team on the award ceremony last week. Also was able to attend and participate that, and it's just so inspiring to see the dedication and the talent that we have within our police department. So kudos to the entire department, and absolutely appreciate all the hard work they do during these times. As the council, I think, has all been receiving communication from constituents across the community around waste management street pickup. I did want to report that last Friday, I did meet with the management staff, waste management, along with their contractor that does the street sweeping. Ask them to sit down and provide a full picture of what the challenges are that they've been facing that are resulting in these service delays with street pickup. And no surprise, not unlike many other businesses, they have been experiencing staffing challenges, which results in delays to street pickup, which creates frustration for customers. So one of the first asks that we had was that they put together a better communication platform to let customers know when delays are going to be occurring, or if they have occurred, and when that service will be restored. So I think that's at the root, right? Some of the frustration is customers are kind of left in the dark as to what's happening with the street pickup. So Waste Management will be establishing early as next week a call out that will go out to all customers that are impacted in terms of street pickup delays, and be informed as to when that service will occur. And then on a go-forward basis, they're working diligently to restore the staffing levels that they need to sort of stay ahead of the street pickup and provide better coordination with their contractor that does the follow-on street sweeping. So we will continue to monitor that very closely. Please continue to send constituent emails that you receive to us. We'll forward those on to Waste Management to respond to. But encourage the community to be patient as Waste Management sort of struggles through this, but they are committed to provide the service that the customers have paid for. Also want to report that Healthy YOLO Together has been providing free saliva-based COVID testing at Norton Hall since August of this past year here in Woodland. And we've been in conversation with Healthy YOLO Together around how to potentially continue that post December 31st of this year. Their funding is winding down, and so they've reached out to all of the cities as well as the county to consider funding partnership to allow that testing platform to continue into 2021, which is going to be particularly important as we get through this holiday season and monitor very closely the new variant. So I anticipate actually on the next council agenda having an action item for the council to consider funding partnership to continue that free saliva-based testing at Norton Hall, and appreciate Healthy YOLO Together's commitment, dedication to our community to continue to provide that service and partnership. And then real quick, December 21st will be the next and final council meeting of 2021. If you can believe that. On that agenda, I'll call out the SB 9, which is Senate Bill 9, which the legislature approved this year, and the governor has signed into law, will go into effect January 1st. And this is the bill that somewhat controversial and highly debated around allowing single family owned properties to be subdivided and additional units to be built on those properties by right. So we've been working very closely with Best and Krieger, our legal counsel, to present an urgency ordinance before the council at the next meeting that will allow the city to maintain as much local control on this issue as we can. As a lot of the questions that are being raised around the interpretation of how this new law will impact neighborhoods still need to be vetted out, but we'll be presenting a proposed ordinance on the 21st for the council to consider that would preserve as much local control for now as we can. Ultimately, we'll bring back a final ordinance to address that new legislation, most likely as part of our comprehensive zoning later in the year. And then as tradition will have it, we'll have annual reports on the sports park CFD as well as measures J and measure F. So we'll report those to the council and the public. Those simply outline the revenues and expenditures for those various funds and seek community and council input as we move forward with the budget process next year. And then lastly, we'll round out with a council calendar for 2022. So we'll outline for the council your council meeting schedule for next year and identify some key highlights for the calendar next year that the council and the community can look forward to. So that concludes my remarks. Mayor Vega, I'll give it back to you.
Thank you, City Manager Hyatt. Okay, so I think that brings us to item H, the consent calendar, which includes items number 3 through 13 on our agenda. Okay, so I think before we entertain a motion or any items the council would like to remove. Hang on a second, sorry, I went off my notes there. So I think before entertaining a motion or any items that the council would like to be removed pursuant the Brown Act requirements, the city attorney has a verbal report on item number 8 pertaining to the contract amendment with the city manager. So.
Thank you, Mayor Vega. And just before I get to that, I just wanted to note for the minutes, and you may have mentioned this, but if you did, it slipped by me that there was no reportable action from our closed session this evening. As to item 8 on the consent calendar is a proposed amended and restated employment agreement for the city manager for all local changes to local executive compensation. There needs to be an oral report at the meeting prior to the council taking action. So if this new agreement is approved, the agreement would increase the city manager's monthly salary from $19,600 to $22,600. And it would provide for an increase to the city's matching contribution to deferred compensation from a maximum of 2% of his annual salary to a maximum of 5% of his annual salary. For a maximum potential matching contribution of $13,560. All other terms of the employment agreement would stay the same as his current contract. So with that, I am available for any questions, but you can keep this item on consent.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Walsh. Okay, so council colleagues, are there any items that you would like to remove from consent calendar for further discussion? No. Hearing none. Madam Clerk, are there any members of the public? Oh, Councilmember Stallard, were you going to say something?
I was going to make a motion that we approve the consent calendar, Madam Mayor.
Okay, do we seek public comment before voting on the consent item?
Yes, just confirm that there's whether or not there's public comment first.
Okay. Any public comment? I don't see any hands raised. Madam Clerk, any voicemails?
No.
Emails?
No.
Okay. So, Councilmember Stallard, did you hear your motion?
I'll renew my motion that we approve all consent calendar items as stated tonight.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a second? All right.
Councilmember Garcia Cadena.
All right. Seconded by Councilmember Garcia Cadena. Okay. Are there any additional comments? No, any discussion?
I just have one comment. I'm just glad this council is not recruiting a head college football coach. We wouldn't be able to afford our city manager. I'm glad we're given a substantial incentive to stay with the city of Woodland. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Landsberg, Mayor Pro Tem Fernandez.
Thank you, Mayor Vega. I just wanted to make a note and thank Mr. McLaughlin for his interest on serving on the Planning Commission. That's an item number 7. So I want to thank him for that.
Great. Thank you. Okay. So I think we're ready for a vote. Madam Clerk?
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Fernandez,
Aye.
Councilmember Garcia Cadena.
Aye.
Councilmember Landsberg.
Aye.
Councilmember Stallard.
Aye.
Mayor Vega.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So I think now we're moving on to item I, public hearings. Item number 13, the water sewer rate ordinance first reading. I think I have a staff presentation, Mr. Hyatt. You're gonna keep that up?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor Vega. I will hand it over to Kim McKinney, our Administrative Services Director, to provide a proper introduction to this item. But as you recall, back at your October 5th meeting this year, this council received a water rate study, which recommended increases to both water and sewer rates for customers within Woodland. The council gave direction for us to set a public hearing for that proposed increase. Tonight's action is specifically to conduct that public hearing, receive additional report from staff and our consultants on the proposed increases. With council approval this evening, we will have a second reading that will come back to you at the January 4th meeting. So I'll ask Kim McKinney to provide additional introductory remarks and then hand it over to our consultant.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. Yeah, as the city manager mentioned, this tonight is the public hearing process for adjusting the water and sewer rates. We did bring to council in October the preliminary rate studies. Following approval of that, we mailed out notices to all of our customers in the city as part of the Proposition 218 process. So the city has 16,799 utility accounts that received Prop 218 notice. And we did send notices to both tenants and to property owners, and we allow one objection to the potential rate increases per property. So it could come from either a tenant or a property owner, but not from both on the same parcel. So following the close of the public hearing, we would tabulate the number of protests that we received, and we would need to receive more than 8,567 protests for us to not be permitted to move forward. So just as a reminder of what the 218 process includes, I'm going to have our consultant, Sean Korn, walk through a reminder for you about what exactly is included in our rates and how our system is affected by that. So Sean, if you want to go ahead.
Thank you, Kim. Good evening, Mayor and council members. I will share my screen and give you a brief presentation on the summary of the water and wastewater rate study. As we go through a rate study process, really our key goal of this process is to develop rates that generate sufficient revenues to operate and maintain the water and wastewater infrastructure on a standalone basis. So we evaluate water separately and wastewater separately. And a key element of that, and really the reason why you have to go through this process, is to meet the requirements and intent of Proposition 218. This is codified in the California Constitution, and it provides the rationale for developing proportional and cost-based rates. We do that through generally accepted principles and methodologies as outlined by the American Water Works Association and the Water Environment Federation, but all based on the city's specific customer and system requirements and costs to meet those requirements of Proposition 218. The way we do that is through a three-step process: a revenue requirement, a cost of service, and rate design. And this provides us with that proportionality and the overall cost of the system through the revenue requirement, which sums the total operating and capital costs of each utility. The cost of service, which then proportionally distributes the cost between each of the different identified customer classes of service. So as an example, for water, that's your residential, your non-residential, and your irrigation or landscape customers. And then based on the results of that cost of service analysis and the revenue requirement, then we can develop proposed rates. We've completed all three of these steps, as we mentioned and walked through in October with the council. So a quick summary of the revenue requirement for each of the utilities. It's based on the current rate levels, those adopted rates that you have in place today for the water and wastewater systems, and your recent customer characteristics. So number of accounts, the amount of water consumption used, the amount of wastewater flow generated as part of that for each of those utilities. The O&M expenses, our operations and maintenance expenses, are based on our fiscal year 21 and 22 budgets. As mentioned in the staff report and included in the analysis, there is some additional staffing and costs for both utilities starting in fiscal year 22 over and above the existing budget. A key element of any utility is the development of a capital funding analysis, and that's based on the current capital plan for each of the utilities and looking at how those major capital improvement projects are funded on an annual basis. As part of this study, and kind of continues from prior studies completed by the city, is a increase in the level of annual reinvestment in the system. So the renewal and replacement of those aging assets and infrastructure, the pipes, the pumps, and other infrastructure needs. Now, as we go through this process, we also have a couple key financial metrics that we talk about, and that's making sure that we're adequately reinvesting in the system annually. That goes back to our capital improvement plan that I just mentioned, as well as maintaining legally required debt service coverage ratios from past debt that was issued. Just as a note, we're not in this 5-year period looking at issuing any additional debt. And then maintaining prudent ending reserve balances, so cash on hand to fund future. So we take each of these components, and this is a summary of the water revenue requirements. The first bar of each year is those annual operation and maintenance expenses. That increases over time based on historical inflationary adjustments. The red bar in the middle is the rate-funded capital, so the amount of reinvestment annually through the rates that is funding capital improvements. And the green is the net debt service, that existing debt service that you have in place today. Again, no new debt is being issued for either water or wastewater. The horizontal dashed line going across is the current level of revenues based on today's rates, today's customers, and the projections of revenues out through fiscal year 2026. So you can see that as we start out in 2022, it's just below the total expenses and then stays below as we go out into the future. So to tip that horizontal line to the top of each of those bars so that revenues equal expenses, then we need a 3% annual increase effective January of each year. So fiscal year 22 would be January of 22, January of 23, and so on for each of these years to meet our total expenses as identified in the study. Very similar approach here for the wastewater utility. Again, we add our operations and maintenance expense, our rate-funded capital, and our debt service. Again, no new or future debt plan during this time period. You can see that dashed revenue line for wastewater is much closer to the total cost associated, total cost each year of maintaining the wastewater utility. So for fiscal year 2022, revenues equal expenses. So there's no change proposed in January 1 of 2022. Starting in January 1 of 2023, there's a 2% annual increase. So for each of these utilities, what I'll reference annual adjustments of historical inflationary levels. Capital is being funded adequately through our rate-funded capital component and the use of available reserves over this 5-year period. So once we know the overall revenue needs of each utility, then we can develop the cost of service analysis. So for water, that's based on the fiscal year 2022 revenue requirement and the 2023 fiscal year for wastewater, as that's the first year of the rate change. As we go through the cost of service analysis, that is based on how each customer class utilizes the system and the costs associated with providing that infrastructure and service for water and sewer customers. Now, this is a snapshot and a point of time. As I mentioned, we use fiscal year 22 for water and fiscal year 23 for sewer. And then we project out based on the revenue requirement needs going out into the future. But what this provides us with is the reset of the rates so that our cost of service is set for our first year of setting rates, 22 for water, 23 for wastewater. And then we develop the proposed rates after that. So this provides you all with the information necessary and staff as we walk through this process to develop those proposed rates. And this is really critical to maintaining equitable and cost-based rates through this process as system and customer characteristics change from time to time. So what we saw when we developed the cost of service for the water utility is we compare the current average revenue to the current average expenses. And this is system-wide. When we get to the rate design, I'll talk a little bit more about the fixed charges versus the variable charges. But what you can see from this slide is that residential needs to go up a little bit. Non-residential is just about even. There's a slight increase there, and there's a slight decrease in the landscape or the separate irrigation meters on the water side. Now, this is really driven by how these customers use water and changes in their consumption patterns since the last rate study about 5 years ago, and how the system has changed since then. Very similar approach, but based on the wastewater characteristics for the wastewater customer classes of service, which you can see here is a couple more classes. We have a single family class, a duplex class, a multifamily, which is everything larger than a duplex served by a single meter. And then for our commercial customers, we have low strength, medium strength, and high strength. And what that is based on the cost of treating their wastewater. The higher the strength, that's a measurement of, in non-engineering terms, how nasty that wastewater is and how hard it is to clean for discharging. We've split those into categories based on how they're used, and then schools. And so you can see there's some cost differences fluctuating. Again, nothing out of the range of reasonableness that we would see. But again, we reset rates at each cost of service to reflect that, because the characteristics on the system have changed since the last study. So now that we know the overall revenue needs for each of the years for the next 5 years through fiscal year 2026, we know the allocation of costs for 2022 for water and 2023 for wastewater, we can develop the proposed rates. We are maintaining the current rate structure, or how you charge each customer, but we're changing the level of the rates based on the cost of service results, those unit costs. So for water, we have a fixed charge and a variable charge. That variable or consumption charge is a tiered structure for residential customers. So at the higher tier levels, which we'll see in a moment here, there's a higher rate associated with the cost of providing water at those higher levels. And then a uniform rate, or the same rate for all consumption for all other customers. And then on wastewater, we have a fixed charge that varies by customer class. That's based on those cost of service unit costs. And then a variable or a volumetric charge for the non-residential low strength, medium strength, and high strength. And again, that's going to vary for each of those three customers based on the impact they place on the system. So I'll start off with the present and proposed water rates. Inside this orange box, you'll see the current or present rates. And you'll see for a 2-inch and less meter, it's the same flat rate, and then it increases for the larger meter sizes. That's based on the demands or the capacities of those meters to reflect the cost that can be placed on the system. The proposed rates for fiscal year 22 have a slight reduction in the lower meter size rate and a slight increase in the higher meter size rates. That's to clean up some of the relationships or the ratios between the meter sizes and those equivalencies. Going out into the future, that is across the board increase of those 3% from the prior revenue requirement for fiscal years 23 through 26. On the consumption side, you'll see inside the orange box here, the tiered rate for residential. You can see some minor changes there between the present rates and the proposed 2022 rates. Increase in most cases for the first and third tier, and a slight decrease in the middle tier. Again, that's based on how those customers in those tiers use water. And then for non-residential, a slight decrease in that consumption, and then a decrease in the landscape for the consumption charge. Again, fiscal years 23 to 26 are based on the overall revenue adjustments once we've reset to the cost of service analysis in fiscal year 2022. So what does this mean? On average, you can barely see it in these charts, just given the overall change. You can see in the numbers below, there's some slight changes over time. Again, we implement a partial year, so midway through the fiscal year. So we see this kind of balancing out over time over those customers, but very minimal impact to the overall customer at the 3% adjustment in January. On the wastewater side, I've highlighted 3 years, the present rates, fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 23. We are not proposing any changes to fiscal year 22. The rates that are in place today will be in place through fiscal year 22 up until January 1 of 2023, if approved by the council. And you'll see here, that's where we have a change in the single family and other residential customer groups, the fixed charge, that flat rate for each customer. And then you'll see the change again in the fixed charge for the low, medium, and high strength to reflect the overall costs on the system for each of those. And then in the volume charge based on their total water use for the low, medium, and high strength customers. Again, a little bit of a change from water where we saw a slight decrease in the overall fixed component. On the wastewater side, we saw a little bit more of a movement to the fixed costs on the cost of service analysis. So with that, next steps, as mentioned prior to this presentation, we'll take any questions that the council may have. And then if there is no majority protest, then you may adopt the rate study and approve the 5-year maximum rates. And then those rates are projected or proposed to be implemented January 1st of each year through January 2026. And with that, Mayor, I will turn it back over to you or staff and answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Korn. And thank you, Kim. Appreciate that. Okay, so now I will open it up to see if council has any questions of staff or Mr. Korn. Councilwoman Garcia Cadena, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Korn, I have a question on slide number 10. Can we go back to that for a minute? Let's see if I can.
This slide here?
Yes. So I'm just wondering with the 10, looks like 10-inch meter, that increase is like double. Is there an explanation for it being such a large increase compared to the other ones?
Yeah, so very good observation as you're watching me fly through the presentation here. Yeah, what it is during the last rate study, we did not set a rate for those larger meter sizes. So the maximum rate that could be charged was the 6-inch, that $329.40. So with this study, we added the 8 and the 10-inch and based those on the appropriate equivalency factors. So those are available should the city have a customer come in that requires an 8 or 10-inch meter.
Okay, and do we currently have people businesses that require an 8 or 10-inch meter?
I am looking right now. I believe we have an 8-inch meter. Sorry, we have one 10-inch meter at one of the larger commercial customers.
We do. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions, my colleagues?
Madam Mayor, this is Rich Linsberg. When this was being discussed at staff level, I raised the question about what would happen if we we were to forego a rate increase for a year. In other words, stay it for a year. And I think staff was going to look at that. And I wonder if there was a response to that either from our city manager or from Ms. McKinney.
Yeah, Councilmember Lansford, we did discuss that internally, and I believe we asked our rate consultant, Sean Korn, to take a look at that. Mr. Korn, I don't know if you can sort of illustrate for the council what that might mean if we were to defer the first year rate increase on water.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to jump back to my screen here just to give a better illustration. So what you see here is that water revenue requirement. And so the overall percentage rate adjustment, that 3% revenue increase that we're looking at or proposed for fiscal year 2022, then that carries forward. So our costs won't change, right? For the most part, our projections will stay about the same, assumably, for the rate study. And so if we do forego, or if the council were to forego a rate adjustment in 2022, then that would need to be made up in the out years, either in 2023 or in subsequent years. Now, the challenge to that is that we are proposing maximum rates. So the council can't go above what we've noticed here through the Proposition 218 process. So if you deferred a rate adjustment, reserves would need to be used to make up for the cost that we would incur in 2022, this fiscal year we're in here that we're moving forward with. And then in 2023, you would have to either step rates up to the proposed level in 2023, which would theoretically be about a 6% increase. That would be from 3 plus 3 in 22 to 23. Or continue to reuse reserves because you would continually be behind from what your actual projected costs would be. Did that answer the question sufficiently, council member?
Yes, it does. Thank you. Appreciate the feedback.
Thank you.
I could also add a comment to that. I'm sorry, just that in addition to using reserves and larger increases in the future, we do have rate covenant requirements that we have to meet for our existing debt, which are ratios that we have to show based on the revenue that received. And if we skip a year of adjustments, we struggle to meet those requirements for our bondholders.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McKinney. Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Fernandez.
Thank you, Mayor Vega. Thank you for the information that you presented. And I want to thank the city for supplying us with clean drinking water. I appreciate the fact that we can open the faucet and we can enjoy the water that we drink in our community. And I would like to know, besides postponing a rate increase, are there other measures that can be taken within a jurisdiction to make up for the revenue in other ways other than charging the consumer? So I know we enjoy having clean drinking water, and I realize that we have to pay for it. Are there other alternative methods available to cities to provide a service without giving the costs to the consumer? Is that a valid question, Mr. Korn?
All questions are valid, council member. So we are a bit limited in what we can do, and I'm sure Kim or Ken can chime in here. But as we think about a water and wastewater fund or enterprise fund, the goal is for them to be self-sufficient. So if we start thinking outside of what we charge for rates and fees, then it falls back onto other city funding sources, right? I'm going to say, general fund as an example. This is just an example that would need to support that. There's not other that I'm aware of. There are not other funds that would come and pay for the O&M. Where the utilities generally receive the outside funding is from other state grants for capital projects or federal grants for capital projects. So the infrastructure needs, that's where you'll generally get that outside funding. Otherwise, the funding sources come from other city revenue sources, whatever those may be, which ultimately generally come back to the same customers on one way, shape, or form as part of that.
Thank you. And I just want to hear that. I hear people, are concerned and they're distressed over a rate increase. But I also realize that we have an obligation to pay for the services that we're receiving, and water is a necessity that we all have. And so having it bottom out at 3% across the board seems as a fair way to pay for something versus putting the burden down the line on the city to try to manage that. So I just want to thank you for giving us that information, and I understand that citizens are upset about rate increases, but I think that we are looking at also providing our citizens, our residents with clean drinking water and providing the infrastructure that we need. So I just wanted to know that we hear your concerns, or I've heard your concerns, and I just want it to be known that we don't really necessarily have other alternatives. So thank you, Mr. Korn, for the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Fernandez. Okay, any other questions? Don't see any. So I think at this point, it's time to open up the public hearing. So Madam Clerk, are there any emails or voicemails?
I do have one email, and I do see that there is somebody raising their hand. Should we take the person raising their hand first?
Yes, please.
Okay. Joel, do you hear me?
Hi, yeah, I hear you. When Sean was given his presentation, he said he was taking into consideration historical inflationary rates. And I was wondering if any consideration was taken into this year's inflationary rates. It's gone up 6.2% this year. So I know it's a lot higher than it has been. So I didn't know if that was taken into consideration.
Thank you, Joel. Is that your only question?
Yeah, out of that presentation, that was my only question.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Korn, are you able to provide an answer to that?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Unfortunately, we did not plan on 6 or 7% inflationary levels. You know, we had completed this about 2.5 months ago to go through the Proposition 218 process. We do have built-in inflationary levels. We're running at about 3.5% a year over the rate study period. And so any increase in costs in the short term would have to be funded through existing reserves for each of those utilities. So we did have a little bit of a bump in 2022 as we started to see this coming, but we did not raise it to the level of what actually happened as we've gone through this last 6 months.
Thank you, Mr. Korn. And Joel, thank you so much for chiming in here. Madam Clerk, so do you have voicemails now?
I do have one email that I'll go ahead and read. Dear council members, we have just been through 5 years of ever increasing rates, and now you want to further increase our water and sewer rates for another 5 years? This is ridiculous, especially for those of us on fixed incomes. We already have some of the highest rates in the state. I propose the city should turn over the water and sewer management to a private company that would probably do a better job of managing this resource rather than have it run by city employees. Has anyone looked into this? If you drive around Woodland, you can see how many people have let their yards become unattractive due to the increasing unaffordability of our water rates. Please rethink these increases and come up with a better and more efficient way to manage this. I am unable to attend the meeting via Zoom due to a prior meeting commitment at the same time. Yours truly, Sandra Adair, Woodland. And that's all I have. I did want to mention, Mayor Vega, that we did receive 110 protest letters.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
You're welcome.
Okay, so no additional hand raised that come up. I'm not able to see it here readily available.
No.
Okay. Right, so at this point, I'm going to close the public hearing and bring the item back to council for discussion or a motion. Any further discussion?
Mayor, the questions that I have were answered well, and it explains why we need to look at these rate adjustments periodically. And the way it's prepared by Mr. Korn and his company and staff, I think the way it's presented is appropriate and we should move it forward.
Any other discussion from council? For myself, I just want to make a comment. So Mr. Korn, Kim, thank you so much for this presentation. I appreciate all the detailed explanation and certainly answering the questions that have come up tonight. You know, I recognize that increasing rates is not something that is received well. I also recognize the need for providing quality services to our community members. So this is a challenging topic, but I appreciate Mayor Pro Tem's Fernandez's comments and exploring potential solutions. That sounds like this is the option that we have at hand today. So is there one of my colleagues that would like to make a motion? Okay. Councilmember Stallard, is that a motion? A question?
I move we adopt the requested staff action, that we acknowledge the receipt and of the report, which has been well presented to us this evening, and that we proceed to adopt the rates, which are below the rate of inflation. Thank you.
I'll second it. Lansberg will second.
Okay, so motion by Councilmember Stallard and seconded by Councilmember Landsberg. So Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Mayor Pro Tem Fernandez.
Aye.
Councilmember Garcia Cadena.
Aye.
Councilmember Landsberg.
Aye.
Councilmember Stallard.
Aye.
Mayor Vega.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Okay, now the next item is item J. Item number 14. All right, so Kim, are you going to start that up for us?
I will, yes. So this item is there's two actions that we're including in the proposed recommendation tonight. And this is related to the Prudler subdivision, which is the development of single-family homes that's directly south of the County Fair Mall and north of the Community Senior Center. So in between there is a new development. As new development occurs throughout the city, due to limitations in the state of California related to Prop 13 and the impact that has on property taxes that cities receive, typically as new development occurs, we need to look for alternative methods to have funding sources to pay for additional public amenities that are installed to keep them maintained and looking nice. And so our general plan also includes discussion about the city requiring new development as it occurs to implement these additional funding sources. So the Prudler subdivision map was approved in 2016 and included in the conditions of approval in their development agreement. The city requires them to form a community services district, community facilities district of services, CFD, and also to annex into an existing sports park maintenance CFD that we have. So the community facilities district is one way to come up with money to pay for the ongoing annual maintenance of things like landscaping, of parks, streetlights, and other public amenities. We've done that throughout the city with use of lighting and landscape districts in the past, and the services CFD is very similar to that. And that's what we are moving forward with, beginning the process tonight to set up one of those. So the process that included in setting up a services CFD is that staff has gone through and identified annual costs related to the improvements that are being installed with the subdivision and that will need to be maintained by the city. We apply an annual cost to that to come up with an amount for the services CFD, a maximum annual assessment. Then that amount needs to be allocated across the proposed development. And the formula that's used to allocate that's called the rate and method of apportionment. We call that the RMA. And they come up with a per unit maximum annual assessment based on that process. So for the services CFD, there's 183 units proposed in the Prudler subdivision. We have identified, staff has identified in working with the developer, the annual cost of maintenance we're anticipating at $139,384 a year. So spread over the 183 units, that would be a maximum annual assessment of $761.66. So that again is the maximum annual assessment that will adjust every year by an inflationary factor. But what we actually assess, we will continue to look at on an annual basis and would be based on what our annual budget is. So to the extent that we don't need the maximum assessment, we would not assess it, but we would be allowed, assuming that our annual costs are in line with what we're expecting. In addition to forming the services CFD, we are requiring this development to annex into an existing services district that's already in existence, is the sports park maintenance CFD, which was formed in 2005 as a result of the Spring Lake specific plan development. A portion of the Spring Lakes development parkland requirement was met through a portion of the acreage at the sports park, and the maintenance that goes along with it was included in this services CFD. So what we're doing with this process is just annexing this additional property into an existing district. It doesn't change anything in that district. The formulas stay the same. The annual items that are allowed to be maintained don't change. We continue to go through our annual process of coming up with an annual budget and determining what the annual assessments would be. The only difference would be then that there are additional houses to spread that cost to. So presumably over time, the annual assessment for Spring Lake would probably be limited in and maybe even reduced over time as there are more houses built to absorb the costs as well. So following this meeting, what we're asking for is to set a public hearing date of January 18th. We would mail out notices to the property owners that are in the boundaries of the new services CFD and also the boundaries of what's being annexed into the existing sports park CFD. So the Prudler property are the only folks who would be receiving ballots to vote on the formation and annexation processes. Those ballots would be returned and counted at the public hearing on the 18th, and then assuming that we receive affirmative votes, then that we would have a first reading of an ordinance in January, second reading in February, and then the districts would be formed, or the new district would be formed, and that new property would be annexed into the existing district following that date and would be available for the assessment for the following tax year, fiscal year 22-23. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have, and we have a couple of consultants also with us in the meeting in the event that you have questions for them as well.
Thank you, Ms. McKinney. Mayor Pro Tem Fernandez, I think I see your hand up.
All right, thank you, Mayor Vega. Kim, thank you for the presentation. I just want to confirm, currently there are no homes in that subdivision, correct?
That's correct. They have this requirement to form the district and annexes. They have to complete that before they get their final map, and they can't build any houses until they have their final map.
So who does the notice go out to if there aren't 183 units that are built? So their input.
Yeah, it goes with who owns the property right now, which is Lennar.
So the actual homeowners have no input. is
There
what
are no
you think.
homeowners at this point, yeah.
Right, okay, just wanted to confirm, because I'm like, who's making a decision because there's no one out there? So it's the developer who is, okay.
Yes.
And is that the normal routine?
Yes, that is the normal process.
Thank you.
Councilmember Stallard?
If I may make some observations, Mayor Vega, Councilmember Fernandez's question was a very good one. This is how development is done in California today. If you want to add homes to a community, you have to essentially create a development agreement with the jurisdiction. This is the way it was done for all of the Spring Lake neighborhoods that presently exist. The developer, as the owner of the land, makes a proposal, and he has to come to terms with the city in order to proceed. And that's why, it isn't a democratic process. It's a land development process. And the developer makes the best deal they can with the city before they proceed. And they know that everything the city requires represents a cost factor in the ultimate price of the homes. But that's how things are done. And while people after the fact may not always appreciate it, those improvements that are required by the city in order to help contribute to the betterment of the city, because all the new homes already benefit from everything already here. The police building, the city hall, the library, the parks, already here. They're adding to the city with some certain improvements as part of the land development proposal. I just mentioned that because if you think about what's happened in Spring Lake, which is certainly an issue at the moment, the longer you've lived in Spring Lake, the more appreciation you've had with your home. Scores of thousands of dollars, over $100,000 or $150,000, maybe even $200,000 in increased value in some of those homes, because the amenities determined at the front end have added so much value to those neighborhoods. So, it's not all downside. In economics, they say, don't always ask what it costs, ask what it pays. The investment required at the front end has produced a tremendous downstream benefit to everyone in those neighborhoods. And it'll be the same for the people of the Prudler subdivision as we act tonight to create the structure necessary for those homes to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Stallard. Excuse me, Mayor Vega. Could I just?
Ex-Mayor Stallard.
No, Mayor Vega, I just wanted to make a comment if I could, for clarification purposes. My only concern is that I realize that there are concerns by homeowners in the Spring Lake District. So decisions, as Councilmember Stallard stated, are decisions made by a developer who will then inform the home owners or home purchasers of the tax that is levied in this process. So they really have no say. And when Spring Lake residents are concerned about their fees, it's a decision that's made before, is all I'm looking to clarify, is that it's a decision that's made by the developer, and residents are coming in frustrated at, when their increases are being, I guess, raised or hopefully lowered due to an addition of 183 units. So that's all I'm looking for, is that a decision was made prior to anyone owning the home. So thank you, Council Members Stallard and Kim, for the clarification.
Thank you,
Madam Mayor, if I can sort of chime in a little bit, because I think this is a good teachable moment for the council, because we will continue to have future developments that kind of raise this issue. When we contemplate new developments, and the Prudler project did this as well, we conduct a fiscal analysis, and that fiscal analysis essentially takes a look at the proposed project and analyze what the city's costs and revenues will be if we were to approve the project. And in this case, the Prudler fiscal analysis identified that there would be a fiscal deficit, meaning the service costs, including all the amenities that need to be maintained, would actually outpace the revenues we anticipate from the property taxes and any indirect sales tax. And so this CFD or LNLs are a way for cities to actually capture some additional assessments or property tax value in this case to offset those city costs that we would incur to ultimately at the end of the day make the project fiscally whole from the city's perspective. So we're not putting additional tax burden essentially on existing residents in our community for contemplating new development. So that's kind of the underlying principle when we adopt these new projects, and we have to have this just difficult conversation around forming facilities districts or establishing landscaping and lighting assessment districts. And to Mayor Pro Tem Fernandez's question and concern here. These are established prior to residents moving into the neighborhood, but the purpose for that is actually so that when they have the decision point in front of them to buy the property or not, there's a legal obligation on that title to disclose that there's going to be a supplemental assessment. So, buyers need to be, very informed when they make these important decisions. And so these CFDs and landscaping and lighting assessment districts are disclosed as part of their title documents. So they have the decision point at that point to decide whether that property with those assessments is a good financial investment for them. So I'll stop there and give it back to you, Mrs. Mayor, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Thank you. Any other comments from my colleagues?
I just have one comment, and maybe Vicki, this might help you a little bit. Even an established neighborhood, as I understand it, Ethan, maybe you can chime in too. Even an established neighborhood could decide on their own if 2/3 of the resident owners decide to form a CFD, they can do that with 2/3 majority to enjoy some additional amenities in their community. Is that right, Ethan?
Yes, that's correct. It's not restricted to this. This is just a more streamlined approach. So.
Right. So if we wanted to, we could have other CFDs in established communities. Let's say we wanted some pretty cool bike paths or something the city can't afford, or some amenities that we wanted to put in our little community, then you could do that by establishing CFD. The way we do it now with these new developments is the way the property owner makes the decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Landsberg.
Madam Mayor, I might chime in that there was an effort maybe 20 years ago to create a district in the historic neighborhoods to increase the amount of street lighting available. Unfortunately, it wasn't successful. So that's exactly what Councilman Landsberg is observing. That can be done. Should any group of our community want to make such an effort?
Thank you. And for myself, I appreciate Mayor Pro Tem Fernandez and Ken, the questions you covered and that teaching moment. I appreciate that. A lot of what I hear from Spring Lake residents is this notion where they don't understand who voted at the time to form these CFDs, and then just this, lack of understanding and concern over notification. So again, I appreciate you sharing kind of the process that goes into these new developments, and also when the buyers or the potential buyers that are planning to move in these beautiful communities have a decision point, and it's really at the time of close or when they're considering that. So, thank you for that. So, I don't see any other questions. So I think at this point, I'm going to see if there's any public comment. Madam Clerk?
I'm sorry, I was muted. No public comment.
Okay. All right. So unless there's any additional comments, is there somebody that is willing to make a motion to?
Madam Mayor, Landsberg will move the item.
Okay, great. So item moved by Councilmember Landsberg. Seconded by Tania Garcia Cadena. All right, Madam Clerk, call a vote, please.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Fernandez.
Aye.
Councilmember Garcia Cadena.
Aye.
Councilmember Landsberg.
Aye.
Councilmember Stellard.
Aye.
Mayor Vega.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you. So City Manager Hyatt, just one comment after this, just kind of reflecting on some of the requests from the Spring Lake residents. If we could make it a point to store these formation documents as we get through, so we can have an archives of all these documents. It's just thinking for the future, so we have those readily available and disclosed to the community.
Absolutely. Yep, we'll make sure that happens.
Okay, right, thank you for that. All right, so next it's item number 15, the proposed changes to the tree ordinance. So I see.
Thank you. Yeah, and for this item, Community Services Director Christine Engel, who is doing an incredible job shepherding a review of our tree ordinance, which I think, as the council knows, goes without saying that trees are very important to this community, have a great heritage and tradition here even before we existed. So we've got a very engaged citizenry around how we as a community can be kind of at the forefront, which arguably we've fallen behind a little bit in many respects with regard to our ordinance and protection of our urban forest canopy. And so per the council direction and included in the council priority goals is a desire for us to take a hard look at our tree ordinance and provide updates that would provide better protection for the urban forest that the city is responsible for, but also now considering even some of the trees that are owned by private property. And so we've been working very closely with David Wilkinson and the Woodland Tree Foundation, who provide invaluable insight and perspective and an incredible amount of work actually surveying a lot of the urban forests, particularly the Valley Oak forest that we have here, that has been instrumental in the draft. And so we've asked Christine to do is provide the council with kind of a high level policy framework and an overview of some of these changes that we're proposing. Tonight's action will not actually adopt the changes. We thought it would be helpful to provide this sort of new framework to the council, get some feedback from council members individually and collectively. And what we will do is go back and actually do the final codification of the ordinance and bring it back for first and second reading before adoption. So with that introduction, Christine, if you wouldn't mind walking the council through this meaty item here. There's a lot of consideration that's in here, so feel free to ask many questions. We want to make sure the council feels comfortable with where we might be heading with the ordinance.
Absolutely, thank you. I am trying to share my screen right now. Jay, are you able to help me with that? Actually, I think
I'm here. You should have permission to.
Okay.
There you go.
Sorry about that. All right. Good evening, Mayor and council members. And first off, congratulations to Mayor Vega and Mayor Pro Tem Fernandez in their new roles that they took this evening. It's very exciting. Tonight, we're presenting potential changes to the tree ordinance and asking for your input on the proposed changes. We'll then make the changes to the ordinance we have drafted, working with the city attorney and also with the Citizen Advisory Committee, and then bring it back to you for a first reading if that's what you direct us to do tonight. I'll be presenting the information this evening, as well as Megan Meyer, an associate planner with the Community Development Department, and Wesley Schroeder, the city arborist, is also here tonight and available to answer any questions that you might have. To begin with, the city adopted an ordinance to protect public trees as early as 1940. It regulates mostly the planting, removal, preservation of heritage trees, landmark trees, specimen trees, and street trees, which street trees are basically city trees, on public property, and specified private property within the city. Currently, there are over 16,000 public trees. The City Council has continued to demonstrate its dedication to trees historically through the adoption of the ordinance, as well as adopting 2 different plans in the last 5 years. The 2017 Climate Action Plan identifies increasing the community's tree canopy cover to 25% by 2035. So we've been making really good progress. In 2009, the average tree canopy cover was 6.9%, and it increased to 14.5% in 2019. Additionally, in 2019, the city received a grant for the preparation and adoption of an urban forest master plan, which the city council then adopted. And this is a plan which is a roadmap for maintaining a thriving urban forest. Maintaining the tree canopy in Woodland provides benefits to the community, including energy savings, air quality improvements, carbon dioxide reductions, water quality improvements, visual quality benefits, benefits to wildlife, and also property values. The city and residents benefit from its partnership with the Woodland Tree Foundation. In addition to planting hundreds of trees over the years, they also do additional projects such as counting, the recent counting of oak trees, both private and public within the city. In 2020, they counted perhaps some of the oldest trees in Woodland, approximately 200 valley oaks, measuring over 40 inches diameter at breast height, and they counted approximately 800 valley oaks altogether. Over the years, a group of citizens comprised some of the members of the Woodland Tree Foundation, but then also other interested citizens in the committee, requested changes to the tree ordinance. Not only did they request the change, they spent countless hours, probably hundreds of hours, reviewing ordinances from other cities, drafting language for an ordinance, serving residents that have valley oaks on their property, amongst other efforts. They also have been instrumental in reviewing the draft ordinance that I'm presenting to you this evening along with Megan, and they provided input that I'll also share with you tonight. So an overview of the proposed amendments. Let's see, let me just move this a little. Actually, this is looking a little wonky to me. Okay, here we go. Public trees. So the proposed changes to the ordinance focus on several different land uses. For public trees, which again are the city trees, there's two different ways that city trees can be proposed for removal. A resident can submit an application to the city that requests its removal. And then at that time, the city arborist or the Parks and Rec Commission can make a determination on whether or not the tree should be removed. The other way is if the city arborist recommends removal, then we move forward with the removal of the public tree. One of the comments that we've received from the public numerous times is that they would like more public transparency and public involvement in this process. So what's being proposed tonight is that in order for a tree to be removed as proposed by the public or as proposed by city staff, it would go through the following process. A notice would be posted on the tree stating that its removal is recommended and stating the reason why it is recommended. The notice would be posted for a minimum of 14 days, and it would also identify when there would be a public meeting to discuss the tree's removal, and it would include information for the public to be involved. They could either submit a letter ahead of time or they can attend that meeting. Two members of the Parks and Recreation Commission that are on the Urban Forest Subcommittee, and then one member, which this is a new process, one member from the Sustainability Advisory Committee would all consider the removals proposed either by the public or by city staff. It is assumed that these meetings would be scheduled quarterly, although we need to see kind of what the rhythm would be with how many trees are proposed for removal in the time of year, so that frequency may change. And these meetings would be open to the public and they'd be subject to the Brown Act requirements. The Sustainability Advisory Committee member would be advisory to the Urban Forest Subcommittee. For trees that are not recommended for removal, staff by this committee, staff would then consider if they'd still like to remove the tree. If so, it would be discussed with the city manager. And if it's still deemed that staff would like to remove the tree, it would be brought forward to the city council for consideration. When necessary, a cost benefit analysis would be done to identify the cost of alternatives to removing the tree, such as rerouting the sidewalk or utilities. It wouldn't be done for every single tree that is proposed for removal because the city, frankly doesn't have enough money to reroute the sidewalk for every tree in order to save it. But in unique circumstances, that might be what the city would like to do. So definitely one would be done on a case-by-case basis. And the ordinance, though, would also include a provision that trees that need to be removed because of imminent danger can be removed without going through this process. And this would generally occur when there's a storm and the tree has large limb failure, or even during the summer when there's summer limb drop. For trees that are recommended by the city for removal, it would only be trees that have a diameter at breast height of 24 inches or greater. So it wouldn't be every single tree. Sometimes new trees are planted and they're dead. They're just not thriving and everything else. So it would not be for every single tree, but it would be for the larger trees that we're most concerned about. When the subcommittee has approved a removal, a notice will then be posted on a tree a minimum of 48 hours prior to its removal. And then trees that were considered for removal and the outcome of the decision of the Urban Forest Subcommittee will be posted on the city's webpage so that we continue that transparency. Additionally, if the subcommittee can't agree whether or not a tree should be removed, the consideration of its removal will be sent back to staff and ultimately to City Council if we would like to move forward with the removal. For this process, the citizen committee that I referenced is generally supportive of of what's being proposed. However, they did request that the public notice of proposed removal be posted for 30 days. City staff thinks that 14 days is ample notice so that the public can either submit a letter or come attend the meeting. And then also because it is a public meeting, the agenda will be posted and the public will be made aware in advance of the tree. So we do feel that there is enough ample public outreach that will occur for these trees. So that is kind of a nutshell of what's being proposed for public trees. I'm not sure, Mayor Vega, if you'd like to pause before I move on to the next category of trees, or how you would like to proceed.
I'd like to do that, Ms. Engel, thank you. I'd like to pause and invite any questions from colleagues. Let me see, I don't see any hands up.
I do have an email.
Okay. All right, let's go ahead and hear your email.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Clerk.
Mayor Vega and members of the City Council, as mentioned in the staff report by Ms. Engel, the Sustainability Advisory Committee received presentations on suggested changes to the city's tree ordinance, including presentations by the city's tree division and by the tree study group, consisting of a group of interested Woodland citizens. Following these presentations, the Sustainability Advisory Committee voted unanimously to authorize a task group consisting of 2 members to work with the citizens group and the city to consider revisions to the city's tree ordinance. The resulting process has involved close cooperation between the citizens group and city staff over a lengthy and involved process. The recommended changes still greatly enhance the protection of Woodland's urban forest and raise awareness of the value of Woodland's urban forest. Notably, the enhanced ordinance includes an enhanced level of cooperation between the city and licensed and certified contractors within the local tree maintenance industry. The result will be a stronger and more vital urban forest for the benefit of all Woodland citizens, while helping to achieve Woodland's climate action plan goals. It is important to plant new trees, and it is equally important to protect the trees we have. A strengthened ordinance will help to achieve this goal. Thank you, Mark Ullman, former Chair, Woodland Sustainability Advisory Committee. That's all I have.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Any raised hands?
No.
Okay. And colleagues, any questions on this portion of the presentation?
I'm sorry, Anna, there is one raised hand.
Oh, one just went up, yes. David?
Yes, thank you. If you'd prefer, I save my few comments till the end. Mayor Vega, I'm happy to do that unless you want me to just comment on the section that Christine just summarized, whatever your pleasure is.
Sure. Mr. Wilkinson, why don't you comment on the section that Ms. Engel just covered?
Okay. In general, it's a big improvement over our current ordinance, and I appreciate the work that the city staff has done and presented to you tonight. Christine did mention that the citizens group would prefer to see any city tree, public trees, say planted along a sidewalk, recommended for removal, be a minimum, well, be 12 inches or greater instead of 24. The main reason being a 12-inch tree could be 10-year-old tree. And if it's removed, we start all over with a new tree and we lose 10 years. And it detracts from canopy growth. So certainly if the tree is diseased or not performing well, it should be removed. But if it's simply damaging the sidewalk a little bit or conflicting with a water lateral, there's a good chance that the tree could be kept. And we save 10 years. So anyway, I'll just, that's really my only comment on this first section. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilkinson. I appreciate it. Any other questions? I don't think I see any. So, right. All right, Ms. Engel, do you want to move on to the next section? Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mayor Vega. I had a question. Or
go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I just wanted I wanted to thank Mr. Wilkinson for that information regarding the 12-inch diameter of the tree. But again, the 30-day or the 14-day notice, as 30-day recommended by the citizen group, and or the city's recommendation of 14 days. You said it would be posted, I think, Christine, on the tree. There'd be no information presented to those surrounding or neighboring, in the neighboring vicinity. So it would have to be on their responsibility to look for the information.
No, that's actually a great point. We can flyer the adjacent households. And then also it would be, especially for those like throughout the community that are just interested in trees in general, if they were signed up to receive the city's agendas for different meetings, they would automatically get that information at the same time. So the adjacent homeowners would be aware of it. And then there would be a 14-day advance notice.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I don't think I see any other hands, so Ms. Engel, do you want to move on to the next portion?
Absolutely. So this is an entirely new area that the current ordinance does not regulate at all. This is having a process where an additional kind of educational process would be for trees that are located on private residential properties. This would not be a situation where the city approves or denies the removal of a tree, but engages the homeowner in a process to get education from a certified arborist. So specifically, heritage oaks that are located anywhere on a single family residential unit, and a heritage oak is any valley oak that is 33 inches diameter at breast height or greater, or any tree that is 24 inches diameter breast or DBH or greater that is located within 20 feet back of walk would fall under this process that I'm going to describe for you right now. The homeowner would have to submit a tree removal application to the city. And with that application, they would have to have a quote from a company that has a business license in town with a certified arborist on staff that is a bid for a removal, and then also a bid for major maintenance. And major maintenance is defined as any maintenance of the tree for limbs that are over 3 inches in diameter. So really what this does is if we have a homeowner that just wants to remove a tree, they have to actually get a bid to also conduct major maintenance on the tree that would then save the tree. It doesn't it doesn't cost them anything to do that. We kicked around many different ideas in terms of, can we have them get an arborist report so that they know the health of the tree before they make this decision, but we didn't feel that that was prudent or in the best interests of the residents, because a type of evaluation like that costs about $600. So we felt that at least if they're engaging in a conversation with a company that has a certified arborist on staff, they'll at least be better informed, and then we will be making sure that they've done that. And that is a new requirement that we would be adding to the ordinance as well, is that only companies can work in town that have a business license, that have a certified arborist on staff. So we just can't have, anyone with their chainsaw come out and top trees and do anything else. They're certified through the International Society of Arborists, and there's a set of standards that they have to abide to, so that we feel that there will be more consistent, hopefully, protection of trees in town, and also care for the trees in town. And then when necessary, the homeowner would also be required to get an encroachment permit. And this is another opportunity for the city to make sure that they got the bids that they're required to get to, either prune or remove the tree. And an encroachment permit is required anytime that a company is going to be having their equipment affect the city's right of way. So they can have their big truck parked on the street and it's in the lane of traffic, or they could have their truck parked on the street like a boom truck with the equipment going across the sidewalk and working in the front yard. So it's just another opportunity for us to engage with the public. That was probably a lot. So in a nutshell, on a single family residential property, it's any Valley Oak 33-inch DBH or greater, any tree 24 inches DBH or greater within 20 feet back of walk. They have to submit an application, and they have to get a quote for removal and a quote for maintenance so that they have that conversation.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Engel. I appreciate that. I see some hands raised. Councilmember Garcia Cadena.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Christine, so on average, how many private residential trees are being removed?
Ooh, gosh, you know what? We would not have that information. We know, kind of by concerned citizens or us being out and about in the community when like majestic trees are being removed, and maybe a handful a year, and that's maybe being like overcounting.
Okay, and then this encroachment permit that they have not needed in the past, what's the fee involved with that?
They actually have needed the encroachment permit in the past.
They have needed that. Okay,
yeah,
so
that's a current requirement. So that is a current requirement. It's just another avenue for us to be able to like double check that, in case they miss the whole tree removal application process, that we can then catch it at that point until everyone is educated about it. And I also think that as more tree trimming companies in the area, once they're aware of these requirements, they're going to get on board, and they're going to know like what our process is. And also there's going to be situations where the homeowner might say, you know what, they didn't give me a quote for major maintenance because they're just saying I need to remove the tree. And hopefully at that point, the company will write that on there, but otherwise we can then develop a relationship with them and know that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other colleagues have any questions for Ms. Engel? All right, Mayor Pro Tem Fernandez.
Sorry, thank you, Mayor Vega. Could you explain what 20 feet back of walk refers to? I'm not sure exactly what that term is. At from the street, from the sidewalk, from?
My understanding, and the city manager can correct me if I'm wrong on this, is that it's 20 feet from the back of the sidewalk towards the house.
Okay, so it's, and then can I clarify? The process would be a homeowner would have to apply for a tree removal, and they would or would not have to have the arborist report, or just a quote?
They would only have to have the quote. So
Okay.
we didn't want to burden them with like a $600 report. And any certified arborist, they're not going to do like a lower level evaluation and put their license on the line and also their liability on the line.
And then, did you give us a fee in Tanya's question about the encroachment permit? I didn't get the fee on that.
I actually do not know the answer to that. I'm not sure if there's anyone on the call that does, but that is actually not a new requirement. That is just an existing requirement for, I think if even I get like a drop box and I park it on the street.
Thank you.
I do want to add on the next slide that these are just proposed fines that we've identified. So if you remove a heritage oak without a permit, which a permit is actually the wrong term here, without submitting your application. So you just ignore all these requirements that I just spoke of, there would be a fee of $1,000. And if you remove any tree within 20 feet back of walk from 24 to 36 inches, it would be $500, and greater than 36 inches, it would be $1,000. This is all just proposed, so.
Thank you, Ms. Engel. I have one question. How would these fees be communicated? I mean, how would the community know?
We'll definitely have to do outreach, and we'll have to do outreach to all of the companies that do tree maintenance. There's oftentimes that we get calls from companies asking if they need to get a permit before they do work here anyway. So that's not something that's, excuse me one second. It's not something that's unusual for tree companies to have to get permits. So if they're asking about getting permits, they'll know that there could be fines involved.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Can I see, I don't see any other hands raised. I think we can go to public comment. I see Mr. Wilkinson. Oh.
Yep. Mayor Vega, yeah, there is 2 hands raised, and then I do have an email.
Okay. All right. Mr. Wilkinson, do you want to start us off? Jay, can you unmute Mr. Wilkinson?
Thank you, Mayor Vega. Yeah, this section on trying to save heritage oaks on residential property and larger trees on residential property, we feel is crucial to the new ordinance. And it's what we spent most of our time researching. I would characterize the protocol that Christina's outlined as moderately progressive. When you consider that a lot of cities that surround Woodland, like West Sacramento, City of Sacramento, the county, other cities that have a lot of oaks require permits to remove oaks anywhere in their cities, and they regulate the removal of oaks over as low as 9 inches in diameter. So this is not by any stretch of the imagination radical. Again, it's an improvement over the current ordinance, which provides no protection or process whatsoever for residential oaks. And when we went out and counted valley oaks, the vast majority of our 900 remaining valley oaks over 12 inches are on private residential property. So if we're going to try to preserve our oaks as well as plant new ones, I hope this process will work. As far as the way Christine has presented it, we've talked to Christine about it. I would recommend that instead of saying that a person owning an oak that's contemplating removal needs to get, quote, a bid, Christine, I think it would convey more meaning if we say something like a work write-up, because the goal here is basically, I think, to convey to the homeowner, and the arborist company, we'd like to see alternatives to removal of reasonably healthy trees. And so provide a basic work write-up, and that's really the purpose, is to provide alternatives to removal. I think if we can insert that language, it just seems a little more transparent to what we're trying to accomplish here without burdening the homeowner so much. So those are my main comments on this section, which again, we feel is crucial and very important to the new ordinance. And the Tree Foundation will continue to try to educate the public about the importance of oaks, our heritage, their ecological value, the fact that we used to have 10,000 oaks, now we're down to 900 in a 15 square mile footprint. We'll continue to do that as a Tree Foundation and continue to plant new valley oaks where we can, in cooperation with the city and private property owners. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilkinson. Okay. Madam Clerk, do you have another hand raised?
We have two more.
And
Roll.
Jay, would you start the timer, please? I'm not seeing that up on the screen.
Yeah, this is Rolf. Am I muted?
No, we can hear you.
Okay.
Could we go back to gallery view too? Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is ordinance is a lot better than what we have currently. I mean, it's it's a big step to, I guess, go into, trying to work with private property owners on conserving their oaks. So I just wanted to kind of basically parrot what David's point was, that it'd be nice to have something that clarifies for the arborist that we wanted to have we think it'd be beneficial to know that, for the city staff to know that there was a conversation about preserving trees. It might not even involve major maintenance. It might be minor maintenance. So I think language that's a little bit more to the point, that we would like a discussion with a qualified tree professional, with a homeowner, about, the tree really isn't causing a problem with the foundation of that house. It's just that, it's very unlikely that that's going on. There's really no reason to remove the tree. What the tree really needs is just these actions. It might not even require significant pruning at all. It might be different watering or different amendments or something. So I just wanted, I think David had it on point by saying it should be more transparent what the rationale is, so that there isn't any confusion. We have different arborists coming in down the road. They just kind of do the minimum boilerplate thing. There really should be a conversation about the value of trees and increasing canopy. And, as an arborist, here's what you can do to just make sure your trees are healthy and aren't causing nuisance situations. You can take these measures. So we discussed those with the homeowner, and that may not be major maintenance. It might be even less than that. So that was my comment, to maybe make the language more clear on what the intent is of that conversation. So thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Frankenbach.
And now we have Marjorie Brown. Marjorie?
Hi, good evening. I want to thank Mayor Vega and members of the City Council for taking on this project. And I want to succinctly say that these proposed changes to our tree ordinance are truly important in terms of saving and maintaining and improving our city tree canopy, not only for aesthetics, but energy conservation and all of the other many reasons that are often mentioned. And so I simply strongly encourage the City Council to consider very thoughtfully these proposed changes and to approve them. So thank you.
And Mayor Vega, I have one email.
Okay, go ahead and read it.
Thank you. Dear City Council, thank you for considering this ordinance. As we face a changing climate, we need to do what we can to protect our older trees, especially the valley oaks. We have lost a lot of these special trees lately, as well as other species. More consideration must be given before a tree is taken down. I support this ordinance and the Woodland Tree Foundation. Thank you, Tanya Meyer. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So, City Manager Hyatt, Councilmember Steller, did you raise your hand? Oh, you're on mute.
Mayor Vega, I wanted to make a comment before we conclude our discussion tonight. I want to commend Woodland Tree Foundation. They have been working on this for years, and a great deal of dialogue has gone on. I worked with them. I think it's important to remember that trees are essentially 1/3 of our climate action plan strategy. So the city has an interest in the maintenance of our tree canopy and expansion of our tree canopy. And I think it's a legitimate interest for us to be concerned about it. I also think we need to respect private property, and this certainly does. We're not ever going to tell people they can't remove a tree if they're convinced they want to have it gone. But we want them to be thinking twice and even 3 times about it before they do it, and perhaps considering other alternative options for dealing with the tree if it's of some concern to them. So I don't think there's anything crazy about what's being proposed here. I think it's a moderate response to a legitimate need. I also think we need to be very conscious of the importance of taking care of our tree canopy. And it needs to get more and more emphasis, not even just the same emphasis going forward. And I think, the communities I go to that are well-treated are beautiful communities. Those who are with little or no trees are barren. And I think it's important to us that we stay with this effort and to grow this canopy. And I've already challenged the Woodland Tree Foundation. Like many of us, the hair is graying, and we really need to get our young and more engaged and involved in the importance of our tree canopy in this community. And perhaps all of us as council can help encourage more participation in the tree planting efforts of the Woodland Tree Foundation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Stellard. Okay, I think I'm on mute. So.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, there we go.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make clear, we do have one last important segment of this topic that Christine pointed to, and I think Megan Meyer, Associate Planner, can walk us through, and that is trees that actually exist on commercial properties. And those are typically properties that are not yet developed, that may have existing mature trees, and how we treat those trees in the context of new development. So if the council would indulge us through one last presentation, and I think this one will be pretty straightforward, but important as well.
Megan, is this the right slide for you? You're on mute.
Hi, can you hear me now, Christine? So let me make sure I'm on the right view here. Just one moment. Okay, I think that is the correct slide. Thank you. So good evening, and thank you, Christine, for going over the first portion of the proposed ordinance update covering private development or private homes. So I just wanted to turn now to development side of the ordinance update. As previously mentioned, the current code has limited preservation language and doesn't cover all development situations or types of trees it looks to protect. With the current limited language, there have been a number of development projects with mature trees that were difficult for staff to protect. And while staff is proposing a number of ways to expand tree preservation, it's understood that some flexibility also needs to be built into the ordinance with the use of an in lieu fee. In addition to existing requirements protecting heritage, specimen, and landmark trees, staff is proposing to include trees of aesthetic or ecological value for replacement and to assess all trees at greater than 12 dBH. Additionally, trees 12-inch or greater require justification for the required removal, such as health, life safety, infrastructure, and other development issues to be approved by the governing body. Go ahead, Christine.
It actually has that you have it, Megan. I'm viewing your screen.
Staff also looked at addressing development sites, existing development sites, and the potential of mature trees being removed prior to development. We have had instances of mature trees, even heritage oaks, being removed on undeveloped property. The proposed requirement is to have all undeveloped land with heritage oaks and trees of aesthetic or ecological value go through the previously mentioned tree removal permit, and if approved, are subject to the same replacement requirements as development projects. Planning also receives a number of requests on existing developed sites for removal for EV charging stations, solar upgrades, or replacement, especially in existing parking lots that they're looking to install upgrades. Staff is proposing to have existing properties replace what they are proposing to remove and to have specific guidelines for renewable energy infrastructure that's being requested. The tree ordinance will require some level of enforcement, and staff is working with the city attorney on fines associated for the development sites. And that concludes our presentation, and staff is here to answer any additional questions that you have.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. Okay, so I think I see Councilmember Stollard's hand raised.
Thank you, Mayor Vega. With respect to Megan's report, we regularly require trees in commercial developments, industrial developments, but I've always been concerned about the level of follow-up we do once they're in place. I've seen some places where the landscape has been just left a language. The next thing we know, they're cutting them down, cutting trees down. Do we have any monitoring program in place going forward to make sure that landscape requirements are adhered to down the road? And is there any enforcement mechanism for ensuring that those landscape features are maintained?
We actually do require the landscape maintenance agreements on most discretionary projects, but this will allow us to ask for them on any large development project, which does give us the ability to have some written documents that they agree to maintain and update their landscaping and take proper care of the trees within the landscape that's been approved.
And follow up by asking what consequences are there if they do not maintain the landscape that was required as a condition of proceeding with the development?
I think that will be one aspect of the fines that we look at with the city attorney in terms of enforcement for development sites.
I really would like to see us be more diligent in monitoring the landscape requirements on commercial developments going forward. I think it's in the interest of our entire community that we do so. Thank you. And I wouldn't mind seeing it as part of this ordinance as you proceed to refine it.
Thank you, Councilmember Stallard. Please see, Mayor Pro Tem Fernandez. Oh, you're on mute. Okay, there we go.
Thank you, Mayor Vega. Sorry about that. I just wanted to clarify or ask regarding the fees for the undeveloped or development projects. Would those fees be higher than or lower than than the residential for non-residential properties? If we were to impose any fines, would it be similar to, or would their fees be lower than residential fees? Is that a valid?
That's for the undeveloped sites?
Yeah, for the undeveloped.
So we had discussed it looking at the tree value as per the standards for arborist standards in terms of replacement value, but there'll be a number of things looked at in terms of evaluating the overall DBH of the trees that were removed. So I think overall it would be higher than any residential.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And then just had one more question, sorry. So with the trees on this non-residential property have the same guidelines and the same process that they currently have, or it would how is it, or is it deviating from, because currently there isn't anything, correct? Yeah, so never mind.
Correct. There is nothing,
yeah.
And we and we have had situations where large, even heritage oak trees have been removed from an undeveloped site, a commercial site within the city. We really didn't have any language within our current code to have any type of replacement value or any way to have consequences for that type of action.
And would neighboring homes be notified also on properties that are non-residential?
So the permit review would be very similar if they did it legally and came and talked to us and submitted a tree application. It would be very similar noticing requirements as the private property that Christine went over.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, don't see any other questions. All right, Megan, I'm sorry to cut you off. I didn't realize that there was another section. So Christine, is that the conclusion of the presentation?
Yes, that is a conclusion of the presentation. And tonight we're just asking for any input on areas that you would like seen changed. And then we'll work with the citizen group and we'll work with the city attorney, and we'll come back with a first reading of the ordinance.
Mayor Vega?
Yes.
David Wilkinson is raising his hand.
Okay. All right, let's go ahead and listen to Mr. Wilkerson.
David?
Thank you. Just very brief. I want to thank Megan for her work on this section. It's, again, very crucial. We think it really strengthens the current ordinance. You'll remember the 200-year-old valley oak in the field over by East Main and 113 on-ramp that was poisoned. Pretty blatant. Hopefully this will discourage that type of egregious behavior in the future with some pretty stiff fines. I think those fines are absolutely necessary to discourage that type of behavior. And to Councilman Stallard's comment, yeah, I hope, Ken, you can find more money in the budget for code enforcement, for landscapes. It's a excellent way to preserve more trees. You know, the the old mall, for example, is with all the trees they have there, the condition a lot of them are in is really a shame. I know economics come to play here with property owners during COVID and so forth, but property owners have a responsibility to uphold their landscape maintenance agreements. And I think better enforcement of that will go a long ways for shading parking lots and reducing heat in the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wilkinson.
And we have Rolf again.
Okay.
Rolf, go ahead.
Hi, am I unmuted?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, it would, I think the requirement to maintain landscaping at commercial developments is very apropos in that most of our big heat islands in Woodland are associated with commercial properties where there's a lot of pavement. So really having, enough shade trees in parking lots is one means to, mitigate heat islands. And that's, if we want Woodland to have an average tree canopy of 25%, getting those parking lots that have, 5% canopy up to 15 would certainly help in reducing heat islands and also getting our tree canopy up. So, and also it's just much more pleasant for people who are parking their cars. They will always park where there's a tree. And I often see lots of cars right where the trees are, and, just to get a little bit of shade. So it's definitely desired by the community to have shade trees in parking lots. So that would certainly, this ordinance as amended, as proposed, would certainly go a long ways towards improving that if there's requirements that are enforced. Thanks.
Thank you, Rolf. Okay, so I see Council Member Sallard, your hand's raised.
Yes. Obviously I hadn't thought about this earlier, I would have said it. I don't think it would be a bad idea is if we required at least a 5-year review of the landscaping plan for every approved development as it ages. Because I see a lot of stumps where trees were put in at the initial stage of the development, and there's nothing done about it ever. So I just feel like, in the interest of a beautiful city and a city that we really love and appreciate as much as we do, we should be looking, not just putting these requirements out there. I mean, literally, the people could take the trees out after they get their occupancy permit, and that's the end of it. Because trees do represent a cost factor for those who have them in their developments, but they are an important amenity for so many reasons. So I would just ask the staff to consider that and let us know the reasonableness and let's say practicalities of having a regular review of landscape plans in all approved development. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Sallard. Mayor Pro Tem Fernandez, your hand raised.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Vega. I have another question. On the non-residential, there is a tree replacement, correct? Is it also, does it not apply to residential, correct? Megan or Christine?
It does not, we did not propose it for residential.
Okay, and then could I just clarify for my own preview? Homeowners, private property would require an application for the removal of heritage oak or the valley oak, specifically in trees that are larger than the 24 dBH, correct?
Within 20 feet of the back of walk. So
Okay.
it's at my house if I have a valley oak that's 33 inches dBH or greater anywhere on my lot, or a tree within 20 feet back of walk, 24 inches dBH or greater.
Any tree?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify for me.
It's confusing. You're welcome.
Okay, any other input for Christina and team? Vicky, was that another one?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of voice my agreement with the citizens group that requested a 30-day notification in the process regarding a tree removal. Thank you. That's it for me. Sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Fernandez. Okay, for myself, I really appreciate all the work that's gone into this. I really want to commend the Woodland Tree Foundation and all the work that's going into this kind of thoughtful research and informing the staff's proposed plan. I think protecting our tree canopy is so important to our city. Having a robust, healthy tree canopy kind of enhances the quality of all of our community members' lives. So I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate looking at the 3 different kind of subsets of our community and addressing those here. So City Manager Hyatt, as far as next steps for this item.
Yeah, appreciate all the great feedback. Couldn't agree more with some of the sentiments, particularly in regards to commercial landscapes. So we'll take a look at that. We'll work with staff, bring back draft ordinances as quickly as possible. So expect that to land on your long-range agenda coming up hopefully as early as February or March. Yeah, if you have any questions, comments in the interim, please feel free to reach out, but expect to see an ordinance here first quarter of 2022.
Thank you. I think we're ready to move on to the next item. Item number 6. Oh,
I'm sorry, Mayor Vega, we do
Yes.
have a hand raised from Marjorie Brown. Did you want to?
okay, yes, thank you.
Okay, Marjorie, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I just wanted to thank Christine Engel and Megan Meyer and Wes Schrader for all of their work. And I wanted to thank the council for their consideration of this project. And I think Tom Stallard's idea of a 5-year landscape review plan is excellent. So, yep, that's it from me. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Okay, great. So now we'll move on to item number 16. So it's SB 1383 Organic Waste Reduction Requirement Update and Ordinance first reading.
Great, and I think in the interest of time, I'm going to hand it directly over to Rosie Ledesma. Rosie's much more familiar with this topic than I am. She'll do a better job introducing it. So we do have a 2-part item. This first part will be an update, overall update to SB 1383 and consideration for an ordinance that we need to adopt in order to be in place by January 1 to be in compliance with the state's requirements. And then the second part will be focused just on the food recovery aspect of SB 1383. So I believe Rosie has a good PowerPoint presentation to help walk you through the updates in this item. So Rosie, you want to take it from here?
I see. I saw her, then she went away.
Oh.
Yes.
She's here, she's just muted.
There we go.
Okay, am I unmuted now?
Yes, and we can see the screen. Yeah.
Apologize for that. Good evening, council, and congratulations, Mayor Vega and Mayor Pro Tem Fernandez. I'm Rosie Ledesma, Environmental Resource Analyst for the City of Woodland Environmental Services. And today, as Ken kind of mentioned, I'm giving you a 2-part presentation on both general SB 1383 update, which includes the 1383 ordinance changes, and then the later part would be on the food recovery component itself. So the SB 1383 ordinance that we're proposing tonight, and we're doing the first reading on, has a couple of items that Some of the main items on there include mandatory collection services, waivers, edible food recovery, which I'll go over later, inspection and enforcement, and then some cleanup of old municipal code. There's some old language in there, some that also conflict with some of the new regulations. So a lot of the changes that were in the old ordinance have been cleaned up and added to this ordinance proposal, or the first reading, excuse me. So one of the main elements of the ordinance for SB 1383 is implementing mandatory collection services for all businesses, residential, single family residential entities, as well as multifamily services. So this requires a 3-bin service, which includes trash, recycling, and organics for all of these. It also requires businesses to set up a 3-bin system for employees, as well as patrons if there are food involved in their establishments. So things like restaurants, cafeterias, and whatnot. They'll have to have 3-bin, the trash, recycling, and organics in their lobby or available for employees and patrons. The ordinance also includes commercial waivers, and these are going to be ones for space constraints. For example, there is a multifamily complex in Woodland that has a trash chute that doesn't even fit a recycling bin in there. It's only it's a really small trash bin, and so they've been exempt for recycling. They'll most likely be granted a waiver for organics recycling just because of the space constraints that are there. And then there's also a waiver for very low volume producers of organic waste. And so those will be on a case-by-case basis, but the waiver language is in the ordinance so that they are able to opt out of the organics recycling. The proposed language for the ordinance also addresses the inspections and enforcement elements of SB 1383. And this, this includes the requirements for inspections not only on our Tier 1 and Tier 2 generators, but also our food recovery organization, making sure that there's, safe handling of food and making sure that they're compliant with the contractual elements, as well as the contamination monitoring requirements for all containers, both commercial and residential. The ordinance also addresses enforcement. However, that is not going into place, or that will not be effective until January 2024. And that allows the city to really focus on the outreach and education that we need to provide to residents, businesses, and our Tier 1 generators and our food recovery organizations to understand the law, what's needed, and how they can become compliant. The enforcement methods are also in line with our current penalty schedule. So there's, should we go that route, the violation notice structure, as well as the $100, $200, and $500 elements or fines are the same as our other programs. Okay, and then going outside of the ordinance, some of the other general SB 1383 updates that we have and the requirements that we have for them are the procurement and record keeping. So through a calculator from CalRecycle, we are, as a city, required to purchase or procure 2,830 tons of compost annually, or 4,878 tons of mulch, or 1.2 million kilowatt hours of electricity from renewable gas. So we're currently in the works of finding out how we can meet those procurement requirements. We are contracting with Yolo County Landfill to be able to procure compost at a low rate, something like $13 per ton. And that will also include some giveaways for our residents for some of that compost. So we're in the works of that. That is still coming down the pike. And then updating our environmentally preferable procurement policy, say that twice fast, our EPPP, to include the requirement that all paper products purchased by the city contain at least 30% post-consumer recycled content. So an EPPP policy revision will be coming to council in the next month or so. So look up for that. And then we are still in the works of either developing or looking for a third-party vendor to provide record keeping assistance. There's a lot of elements of SB 1383 that we need to maintain. And if CalRecycle requests that they see to see our records, we have to provide it to them within 10 business days, which might be a little bit daunting and hard if we have nothing but spreadsheets and files. And then the next step to the overall SB 1383 is outreach and education. We're a little bit more behind on this element than we'd like to be at this point. And most of that is kind of due to, time limits and staffing but we are still trucking away. Some of the things that are coming along are meeting with some of our tier 1 generators, some of our, supermarkets, grocery stores, food distributors and whatnot, to let them know about the requirements of SB 1383 and their donation processes. We've also conducted stakeholder workshops, and we plan to do some more, specifically for tier 1 generators as well as food recovery organizations. And we've already met with some of the food recovery organizations, and we'll continue to really provide that outreach to them, especially when it comes to setting up the contracts that are required by SB 1383. The food recovery organizations will require contracts with each tier 1 generator that they are receiving donations from, and we're in the works of drafting that contract or those contracts available for them in the next few weeks, I believe. We're also working with Waste Management to create an implementation plan so that we can roll out the containers for not only the existing residential properties that don't currently already have organics recycling, but as well as the remaining businesses and multifamily properties that don't have it from some of the other existing laws like AB 1826. So, and then we're in the process of developing new outreach material and sending letters and some other outreach materials to them. And that's something that we'll kind of go over in the next presentation. But I do want to share that this year's 2022 recycling calendar that we put out annually is focused solely on SB 1383. And so it's got a great information on there for not only residents, but businesses and multifamily tenants or residents. So we've really kind of made this not only just a working calendar, but also one of our outreach materials. So we still have a lot of work to do in this section. We are, like I said, we're working to get this implementation plan, working with Waste Management to see what the schedule looks like so that we're in compliance by January, just a couple of weeks away. And then I'll stop right there to field any questions that you guys might have about any SB 1383 things before the next section of which is the food recovery. And I don't know how to stop sharing. No.
I'd like to hold questions until the next, the end of the next section. Rosie.
Okay. Ken, did you want to, well, actually, no, that kind of,
Actually, yeah, Mayor Vega, if we could actually take council questions and then ultimately action on this, because the following item focused on the food recovery aspects, we'll have a council member recused from that one. So in order to let them participate in this this item, it's best if we could just take up this separately.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Okay. So I'll open it up to my colleagues to see if there are any questions.
Happy to offer a motion when you're ready.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Seller. Mayor Pro Tem Fernandez?
Sorry. Thank you, Mayor Vega. And Rosie, did you say we would have a date from Waste Management when they would provide the third container to residents?
We're currently in the process of creating an implementation plan and a timeline for when that will take effect. If passed today, the first reading, the second reading will be December 21st, and then 30 days afterwards, which would be January 20th, the ordinance will go into effect. So we couldn't start delivering carts until after then. And so we plan to take a look at the end of January, beginning of February, to start rolling out some of those containers.
And deadline is January 30th or January 1st or January 31st?
It's January 1st. Okay. Yeah, so we're a little bit behind on getting this to council, so that way it's effective before January 1st. But I think a lot of jurisdictions throughout California are on the same boat with this and getting these in last minute. So we're a little delayed, but we're still within reasonable means.
Okay, thank you for your work, Rosie. And I just have one more question. The calendars are available to residents through what process?
Yes, so currently they're just at City Hall, either at the finance counter or at the CDD front counter. We used to have them in different locations throughout the city. However, a lot of places are still closed or not, having it open to the public. So right now, just currently at City Hall.
Thank you for your information.
Councilwoman Garcia Cadena?
Thank you. Thank you, Rosie, for your presentation. Quick question. So if people are not utilizing, residents are not utilizing their green waste, that container, and they put it into their trash can, is there a fine involved? What's the monitoring involved? And same with businesses.
Yeah, so 1383 has some pretty straightforward contamination requirements. And we're kind of seeing how we can gradually get to this level. Right, with the ordinance that we're proposing, and 1383 language, contamination would be considered anything that's not in the correct cart. So if you're putting organics in the trash or in the recycling, or recycling and trash or organics, whatever, it would be considered contamination. So one of the things that this ordinance also allows is for contamination monitoring is remote electronic monitoring. And as you guys are aware, and this is a topic for discussion at a different time, but Waste Management does have the Smart Truck program, and it has not been implemented in the residential sector yet, or if at all. But it is something that we could utilize on the back end to view those videos and pictures without starting the whole process of actually assessing those fees. So that would be something that we're looking at to help monitor some of the contamination issues.
Okay, and then I have one more question, because I've heard conflicting answers to this, but meat products. Do meat products go in trash, or do meat products go in the green waste?
Okay, so here in Yolo County at the compost facility, they do accept meat products. So that also includes byproducts and bones, because in a commercial composting setting, they do break down, especially in the process that they have. There are some composting facilities that don't accept it because their process might be different. It might not get as hot. It might not break it down as well. And it definitely shouldn't go in your backyard compost, which doesn't get as hot. So yes, here in Woodland, you can put it in your organics cart.
Okay, thank you.
I don't see any other questions. So, Councilmember Stollard. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, I would proceed to offer the motion that we adopt the staff action, and then that is to endorse this ordinance at its first reading.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Stollard. Do I have a second? Okay, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Fernandez. Madam Clerk, do you want to?
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Fernandez,
Aye.
Councilmember Garcia Cadena,
Aye.
Councilmember Landsberg,
Aye.
Councilmember Stallard,
Aye.
Mayor Vega.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Okay. So I think that takes us to item number 17, SB 1383, edible food recovery implementation and budget appropriation.
Yes, and Madam Mayor, I will be recusing myself as the executive director of one of the food recovery organizations that is participating in this. So I will say good night and wish you all a good evening.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night, Member Garcia Cadena. Okay, Rezi.
All right, so let me continue with the presentation. Stop. Okay, can you guys hear me and see the screen okay?
Yes, Rosie, thank you.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so one of the biggest portions of SB 1383 is the development of an edible food recovery program. And for those of us in the solid waste and recycling world, this is very, very new to us. And so we're all still learning as a county and all of the jurisdictions within it, how this looks for Yolo County. So one of the main things that, or one of the first things that we did, was hired a consultant. This is the City of Woodland, City of Winters, and Yolo County. We hired TCM and Abound to take a look at, what does a food recovery program look in Yolo County, provide a capacity study that is required by SB 1383, as well as a funding assessment on how to get this program up and running. So through those consultant findings, they identified tier 1 generators. And just a reminder, tier 1 generators are the supermarkets, grocery stores, food distributors, and whatnot. And they have identified 16 of them in Woodland that meet this criterion. Fortunately for us, 12 of the 16 of these food generators, or tier 1 generators, are already donating their food to either the Yolo Food Bank or some of the other smaller food recovery organizations. It's the 4 that are highlighted in red that are not currently donating their food that we really need to work with to get them into compliance with SB 1383. So let me go back actually. So one of the main things that we'll be doing with them is, with all of the tier 1 generators, is letting them know about the regulations, letting them know that they are subject to inspections on making sure that, they are donating the maximum capacity or the maximum amount of food possible, as well as looking at any safe food handling elements. Providing them with the contracts that we need for 1383, and then just kind of really working towards the greater, food donation element of 1383. One of the requirements for 1383 is providing a capacity planning element to CalRecycle. So this is looking at the tier 1 generators and seeing how much they can donate per year. And we look at this in a 3-year section portion. And based off of CalRecycle's capacity planning calculator, they have determined that these 16 tier 1 generators will recover 689,161 pounds per year countywide. Oh, excuse me. Not just the 16 tier 1 generators. It's all of the tier 1 generators throughout the county. Fortunately for us, all of the tier 1 generators throughout the county are currently donating way more than that. However, we've decided to to create a conservative goal for us. Because when we tell CalRecycle, hey, we're going to try to donate 2 million pounds per year from all of these tier 1 generators, they're really going to hold us to that. And then when they ask like, well, why haven't you met your goal? Then we're in non-compliance. So we're going with the conservative measure of the capacity that we'll be providing through the food recovery network. And this is what we've come up with. So one of the other things that the consultants took a look at was who we recommended as a food recovery organization and who we identified. And so they took, I think they surveyed, 63 food recovery organizations throughout Yolo County. And they surveyed them. They asked them, do you guys have capacity to add more food to your current operations? Would you like to expand? If funding were to become available to be able to provide expanded capacity so that more tier 1 generators, more grocery stores can donate to you, would you be able to do this? And so out of those 63, that was cross-referenced with Yolo County Environmental Health's food safety handling requirements. The consultants came up with 9 food recovery organizations, 2 of which are in Woodland, that they proposed the county and its jurisdictions to fund expanded capacity at. So the ones that are in Woodland are Homeward Bound Outreach and the Woodland Volunteer Food Closet. So these ones are the ones, like I said, that have been identified that are able to expand for year 1, which is 2022. And these are the ones that we will be funding or proposing to fund to expand their capacity to meet the needs of those additional tier 1 generators. And as you can see, so the Yolo Food Bank is not one of the ones listed on here. I just wanted to point that out. They were at capacity during the pandemic. Their networks were very, very much needed during that time. So at the point of when we did the consultant report, they were not one of the ones that were recommended to provide additional services to these tier 1 generators. So I just wanted to make that note. Okay, so this is the funding assessment that the consultants came up with. And just a reminder that this is for year 1. So that's year 2022. And what they proposed is that we provide $375,000 countywide to these 9 food recovery organizations to expand their capacity. They also recommended that we provided $387,000 to the Yolo Food Bank for a total of $762,000. That would be from all jurisdictions for the year 1 costs. Since this report was released and we provided this information to the Yolo Food Bank, they have declined to accept that funding. So what we're looking at doing is finding other food recovery organizations that we can fund to expand their capacity to help us meet the expanded tonnage that these grocery stores will be bringing in. So our portion, Woodland's portion, divided up by all of the tier 1 generators, is coming out to $276,976 for Woodland's ask. So today we're asking for a budget appropriation of $300,000. We decided to round up because we're gonna have to spend some money on some of the outreach and education, the flyers, the letters that we're gonna be implementing soon. And so we're requesting $300,000 to help get this edible food recovery program up and running, as well as implementing the rest of SB 1383. So that was my presentation in a nutshell. If you have any questions, I can take those now.
Okay, thank you, Rosie. I appreciate that presentation and overview. Do any of my colleagues have any questions for Rosie?
What's the money for? I wasn't quite clear. I heard outreach and a couple of things, but that's a lot of money. What's it for?
So the majority of it, the 277,000 roughly, is to expand the capacity at these 9 food recovery organizations. The 2 specifically in Woodland are what our funding would go to, or mainly go to. The other portion that was dedicated to the Yolo Food Banks expansion will then go to taking a look at other food recovery organizations that would be able to expand their capacity and add to that 9, the list of 9.
Thank you. And what did the state contribute to implement SB 1383 in 2016?
What did the state contribute?
Yeah.
Nothing. It's
That's
another
what I thought.
unfunded mandate.
Yeah.
Yes. However, we just received word about a couple of weeks ago that they are starting to develop some grant fundings for this. One of them being a competitive grant that Yolo County is actually taking the lead on to apply for. That may help alleviate some of the costs or add additional services. Things like a truck, so that they can help take foods from the supermarkets to some of these smaller food recovery organizations. Many of those don't have trucks, and that's not one of the things that was proposed by this consultant findings or consultant report. So we're taking a look at that. We also were told that there may be some other payment program opportunities from the state. We don't know what that looks like just yet, but as far as what they're providing right now that we know of is nothing. So it's up to the jurisdictions to come up with this.
Thank you. You know, when 1383 came up a while back, I voiced my concerns that this is another program foisted upon the local governments and actually on our farms in the state of California that's going to cost consumers in the long run. What I expect to happen when we go into one of Tom Steller's tenants' restaurants, they're not going to ask us if we want to take home a doggy bag. They're going to give it to us to reduce their load. They're simply going to put it in bags. And as you go out the door, you're going to be loaded up with more food than you paid for, especially at the end of the evening. I'm not sure why the state didn't decide to fund this program. It's a tremendously huge burden on consumers and farms. You know, the idea was to reduce methane, and I get it. I understand the concept, but to put this program on the backs of consumers and our local small businesses and farms is just too burdensome for our community. Have to do it, otherwise we're going to start getting fined. I don't think we have a choice. So with that, when it comes time to it, I'll move the $300,000 reluctantly.
And Richard, or Councilmember Landsberg, excuse me. One of the other things that I wanted to add to that is that this funding request is for year 1. And so this year we are taking it out of our recycling reserve funding. However, that's not a sustainable funding source. And so once we do a kind of a funding assessment on what our needs are to fulfill 1383's requirements, there will most likely be a discussion about potential fee increases to have a sustainable funding source for this, unfortunately. And that's the way that the law was written, is that it stemmed from, tipping fees or franchise fees or things like that.
Yeah, I was out at the dump on Sunday, and I don't know if anyone's been out there, but they have a huge new building out there that's going to be designed and being built just for the composting of these products. They expect tremendous load out there besides what we're going to be taking home in our doggy bags. They're expecting a pretty significant load of composted materials out at the new facility. Build it and they'll come.
Thank you, Councilmember Landsberg. And we're just coming up to 6 minutes till 9. So I think we're gonna need a 5 more minutes to wrap up. Can I get a motion to extend the meeting? 9:05?
Extend for 15 minutes at the most, 9:15.
I was gonna say 9:05, but okay. All right, 9:15. Do I have a
Second.
second?
Second from Fernandez.
Okay. Madam Clerk, will you call roll call vote?
Yes, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Fernandez.
I'm sorry, I had my hand up. I had a question.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
On the motion.
Can we move forward with this motion and then we'll continue? Sorry, Mayor Pro Tem. Okay.
Just had a senior moment. I'm sorry. We're talking about the time.
Is that okay? Should I?
Yes, aye.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Landsberg.
Aye.
Councilmember Stallard.
I think you said aye. He's on mute.
Okay, and Mayor Vega.
Aye.
Thank you.
I did say aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem Fernandez, you had a question?
Yes, thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Rosie, for the presentation. You mentioned Yellow Food Bank refused to take the $300,000 allotment. Can you give me a reason why that is?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of back and forth with Yellow Food Bank and seeing how we can, help each other meet SB 1383. And I think their thoughts are that this law will provide or will generate a lot more tonnage than we're considering that it will, or that we're thinking it will. And so they requested from the cities and county that in order to expand to help us meet SB 1383, they think it'll cost $2 million from all of the jurisdictions. When we hired the consultants to take a look at this, they worked really closely with the food bank to take a look at their operations, their routes, their deliveries, their whole operations, and came up with this recommendation instead, which we thought was a more feasible cost. Their reasoning for declining this offer is that they think it would be too much of a financial burden at this to provide what they think they're required to provide versus what we're
offering to pay.
Yes.
Okay, and my second question or my second comment is that the survey includes organizations that the Yellow Food Bank provides service to. So the majority of the food that is furnished to most of these smaller agencies is provided by the Yellow Food Bank. So my question is, at some point, is this process going to be reevaluated since they were at capacity at the time of the evaluation or the survey, which was in the middle of a pandemic, and I think provided over 2 million pounds of food to Yolo County, or maybe more. So where or what will occur in year 2 if they refuse this financial support? Is there any consideration for re-examining the process if we find that after year 1, what we conceive to be the correct method to use is ineffective or is not as effective as we thought? Where does the city stand, or where does the county stand as far as evaluation of the process after year 1 if the Yellow Food Bank is not involved in this?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that'll have to be a discussion, that the counties need to come up with. Our main goal is to, make sure that these tier 1 generators have these resources to donate their food to so that they're in compliance. So if by the end of year 1, that's just not happening, then we need to reevaluate, and whether that means that's a sit down with YOLO Food Bank or hiring another consultant, then we'll have to determine that later on in 2022. Otherwise, we're hoping that, with the funding that we're getting, potentially grant funding, that we can expand these smaller food recovery organizations to help offset some of these, the tier 1 generators that aren't currently donating. And, as you saw on the list, out of the 16 here in Woodland, there's only 4 that are not currently donating. So we're pretty hopeful that, we can find some of these smaller organizations to help meet those needs of these tier 1 generators. And if by the end of year 1 it's not, then we do need to reevaluate and say, hey, YOLO Food Bank, what do we need to get you guys on board and help the greater network of this?
So currently they will not be involved in the food recovery. Is that correct?
Correct. And not beyond what they're already doing.
Okay. So what they are doing is providing service to most of the smaller agencies, and they'll continue to do that.
As far as I've heard, correct.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Any other questions from council? Do we have any public comment, Madam Clerk?
No.
Okay. There are no hands raised?
No hands raised.
Okay. So Councilmember Stewart, I think you had made the motion.
Landsberg made the motion. I think we need a second.
All right, sorry, Councilmember Landsberg. So motion by Councilmember Landsberg. Do you have a second?
Stallard seconds.
Okay, all right, seconded by Councilmember Stallard. Anna, would you call the
Yes.
roll call vote, please?
Yes. Mayor Pro Tem Fernandez,
Aye.
Councilmember Landsberg,
Aye, but barely.
Councilmember Stallard,
Aye.
Mayor Vega.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries 4-0.
Thank you. Okay, so that brings us to our final item, which is adjournment. And Councilmember Stallard, you had a memorial adjournment tonight?
Yes, we lost one of our wonderful citizens this past few days, Larry Vogelsang. Larry's been just one of those people who pops up everywhere in the community. He's been with Woodland Street Cruisers for years. He was their president, put on many wonderful events in our downtown. He's with the Elks, helped out there for years. And the American Legion helped out there for years. And even at his passing, he was president of Woodland Host Lions. So just a great spirit, had significant health problems, but just kept serving right through it all. And when he recovered, he was right back doing everything he'd always done. We just rejoice in a life very well lived. Larry Vogelsang. Thank you.
All right. With that, that concludes our meeting.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody. Have a good
everyone.
evening.
Thank you.
Right.